The Sunday sun was shining on the porch as I set my coffee cup on the side table. Weekends always had their own rhythm, calm and predictable. Logan was focused on his solar system puzzle, his tongue poking out a bit as he fit Saturn into its spot. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like for more stories like this. Mom, did you know that Saturn's rings are mostly made of ice and dust? Logan asked without taking his eyes off the puzzle. Fascinating, scientist. In a bit, I'll make that pasta you love, I replied, watching my 8-year-old with the kind of pride only a mom understands. Grandma Margaret appeared in the kitchen doorway carrying a pitcher of lemonade. At 72, she still insisted on living on her own, but she spent almost every Sunday with us. Does anyone want some fresh lemonade? Before we could answer, an unknown black SUV pulled up slowly in front of the house. It didn't have visible plates, which immediately set off my internal radar, the one that had been dormant for 8 years since I left the tactical forces to raise my son. 2 men got out of the vehicle carrying briefcases. They wore Navy uniforms with an emblem that looked official from a distance. The taller one was typing on a tablet while the other, burly and wearing sunglasses, inspected our property with far too much attention. Logan, go inside and tell Uncle Kevin we have visitors, I instructed in a calm voice that did not betray the tingling in my fingertips, that familiar sensation that comes before an operation. The men walked up to my porch with forced confidence. Good afternoon, ma'am. We are with the Riverside Public Health Inspection. We received a report of unauthorized activities on residential property, said the taller one as he handed over a plastic badge which he scanned quickly. I've never received any notices about a violation. May I see the official notification? I asked, noticing subtle inconsistencies in their uniform, the emblem slightly crooked, and the absence of standard identification numbers. The notification is right here, ma'am, said the second man, moving closer to Logan, who still hadn't come inside. We need to do a quick inspection and... He reached out for my son as he spoke. That's when everything changed. The man grabbed Logan's arm with too much force. We're going to have to take the boy for evaluation while we do the inspection. In an instant, 8 years of domesticity vanished. The tactical agent I once was emerged as fast as lightning. Let go of my son. Now! My voice came out more like an operational command than a request. The taller man took a step toward me. Ma'am, we are municipal authorities. Resisting can result in... I didn't let him finish. With a fluid move, I twisted the wrist of the man holding Logan, applying precise pressure on the nerve point between his thumb and index finger. He released my son with a cry of pain. Logan ran inside, just as we had practiced in our emergency drills, which, for me, were never just drills. The second man advanced, but Kevin appeared at the door just in time. My brother, a former private security guard, understood the situation instantly. Margaret, code red, Kevin shouted. Grandma didn't hesitate. She activated the silent alarm we installed after a break-in in the neighborhood last year. The taller man pulled something from his belt. It wasn't a weapon, but a stun device. I anticipated his move, turning my body to avoid contact and, in one smooth motion, used his own momentum against him. I applied an arm lock and pinned him against the SUV's hood with a dull thud. Kevin neutralized the second man equally efficiently, forcing him to the ground with a containment technique we had practiced together countless times during my secret basement training sessions. You made a big mistake, I said calmly as I increased pressure on the imposter's arm. You tried taking the wrong person from the wrong yard. The distant sound of sirens announced that real law enforcement was arriving. It wasn't until the police cars pulled up in front of the house that I realized several neighbors were filming everything. Officers Dawson and Miller were the first to arrive, their hands on their holsters as they quickly assessed the situation. Kevin and I kept the 2 men pinned down, and the surprise on the officers' faces was unmistakable. "Ms. Lane? What's going on here?" Officer Dawson asked as he approached cautiously. "These men claim to be public health inspectors and tried to take my son," I explained, still firmly holding the imposter's arm against the hood. "They didn't show valid identification, and when I questioned their legitimacy, they resorted to force." The officers handcuffed the two men as I finally let my posture relax. I felt a sharp pain in my shoulder, a reminder of how long it had been since my last real tactical operation. "Keep the kids inside," Miller instructed over the radio as he requested reinforcements. He turned to me with an inquisitive look. "Ma'am, where exactly did you learn to neutralize two men like that?" Before I could answer, Logan appeared at the door with Margaret, his big eyes watching every move. I signaled for them to stay inside. "We'll talk about it later," I told the officer. "Right now, we need to inspect their vehicle." As if hearing my thoughts, an additional police car arrived carrying Detective Roberts, a middle-aged man with experienced eyes that took in every detail of the scene. "Open the vehicle," Roberts ordered after I briefly explained the situation. "Carefully." What we found inside the black SUV turned a disturbing incident into something much darker. There was a folder filled with lists of names, addresses, and detailed schedules, all for children aged 6 to 10. Logan was on the list, along with precise details of his daily routine. "Jesus Christ," Kevin murmured beside me. The back compartment contained equipment that made my stomach turn: ropes, sedatives, industrial tape, and 3 different fake uniforms, from the electric company, package delivery, and the public health outfit they were claiming. "This wasn't a random attempt," Roberts said while flipping through a notebook with meticulous notes on several families. "They were watching you. They knew exactly when to act." A cold shiver ran down my spine as I absorbed that information. How many times had those men been watching my son as he played so carefree? "Detective," Dawson called as he rummaged through the glove compartment, "I found more fake documents and this." He held up an envelope containing several checks and receipts. Roberts quickly examined the contents. "It looks like we have an organized scheme. The receipts are for substantial payments, all from different cities in 3 states. While the police continued their preliminary investigation, I realized our backyard was surrounded by neighbors, many with their phones aimed at us. Mrs. Patel from across the street was waving her phone. "Rachel, you were amazing. I recorded everything from when I saw those strange men approaching Logan. It already has over 1,000 views on my channel." I closed my eyes for a moment as the adrenaline started to fade. The last thing I wanted was public exposure. I had left my tactical forces life precisely to have anonymity and peace. Inside, Logan sat at the kitchen table sipping hot chocolate prepared by Margaret. His eyes were still wide, yet he looked strangely composed. "Mom, you fought like movie heroes," he commented as I sat down next to him. "They're not heroes, dear. It was training," I gently corrected, stroking his hair. "Remember how Mom used to train people for tough situations before you were born? That was all it was." Kevin entered the kitchen with his phone. "Rachel, you have to see this." The video he showed me was from another angle, captured by the house across the street. It showed the exact moment I pinned the first man against the SUV's hood, while Kevin neutralized the second man. The recording caught my final words to the imposter. "You tried taking the wrong person from the wrong yard." The video already had over 100,000 views in less than an hour. "It's everywhere now," Kevin explained as he switched to other similar videos. "People are calling you avenging Mom. This is ridiculous," I protested. "I only protected my son." Detective Roberts entered the kitchen after a light knock on the open door. His expression was serious, but there was a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Ms. Lane, we need your formal statement, but first, I want you to understand what we're facing. He placed a file on the table. In the last 6 months, we've received reports of at least a dozen children disappearing under similar circumstances in 3 states, California, Oregon, and Nevada. Men posing as public servants or service providers, approaching homes on weekends. I felt a shiver. And you weren't able to connect the cases before? The jurisdictions are different, and the methods varied slightly in each case. Besides, no one had been able to catch the perpetrators until now. He paused significantly. The 2 men you neutralized are our first solid suspects. The FBI is sending a team, and your video is already being used to identify other members of the group. From that moment on, our house turned into an improvised operations center. Agents came and went, phones rang nonstop, and the press began gathering outside. A reporter from the local news managed to approach me when I briefly stepped out to speak with one of the officers. Ms. Lane, can you comment on the viral videos showing your combat skills against the alleged kidnappers? What's your background? Would you do the same thing again? No comment, I replied, quickly heading back inside. At night, when we finally had a moment of calm, I sat with Logan on his bed. He was strangely quiet. Are you okay, sweetheart? I asked, tucking in his favorite blanket. Mom, why did those men want to take me? My heart tightened. How do you explain the unexplainable to an 8-year-old? There are bad people in the world, Logan. People who do wrong. But there are so many more good people, like the police, our neighbors, and us, who won't let them win. He nodded thoughtfully. You didn't seem scared at all. I was terrified, I admitted. But sometimes fear makes us stronger, faster, and more determined. And I would do anything to keep you safe. Logan finally fell asleep, but I stayed awake, monitoring the news on my tablet. The video had become a national phenomenon. Commentators were debating everything, from my immobilization techniques to broader issues of child safety and trust in authorities. Hashtags like #AvengingMom and #Don'tMessWithMyKid were trending on social media. The next morning, Special Agent Ramirez from the FBI arrived with a full team. She was a woman with a serious expression and precise movements that reminded me of my tactical operations days. Ms. Lane, your video helped us identify a pattern we've been trying to trace for months, Ramirez explained as her team set up equipment in our living room. The scheme is sophisticated. They target middle-class families, study their routines for weeks, and then use official disguises to gain access and trust. For what purpose? I asked, though I feared the answer. Multiple purposes, she replied, choosing her words carefully as she glanced at Logan playing in the yard under the watch of 2 agents. Primarily extortion. Some families receive ransom demands within the first 24 hours. Others, she trailed off. As the day went on, our house became the focal point of a federal investigation. The 2 men who tried to take Logan were identified as Raymond Mercer and Thomas Dalton, both with extensive criminal records in different states, though they had never been connected to crimes against children before. Meanwhile, the video continued to rack up millions of views. I received calls from morning shows, invitations for interviews, and even book deals. I declined them all. You should consider it, Kevin suggested as we watched the national coverage of the case. Your story could help other families stay alert. I don't want fame. I just want Logan to feel safe again, I replied, watching my son who, despite all the chaos, had returned to working on his puzzle at the kitchen table, now safely indoors instead of on the open porch. The phone rang again. It was a mother from Oregon whose child had disappeared 3 months earlier after a visit from security inspectors. She was crying on the phone, thanking us for helping break the cycle that had destroyed her family. That call changed my perspective. Maybe there was a greater purpose in all this unwanted exposure. That night, I agreed to give one exclusive interview to the national news, as long as the focus was on security measures families could take rather than on me. The interview took place 3 days after the incident. Reporter Jessica Winters sat up in our living room while her team adjusted the lights and microphones. Logan was at a friend's house, protected by an undercover agent, a precaution Agent Ramirez insisted we maintain until the entire network was dismantled. In 5, 4, 3. The cameraman silently gestured with his fingers. We're here with Rachel Lane, whose extraordinary defense of her son against 2 disguised kidnappers captured the nation's attention, began Jessica. Rachel, could you tell us what happened at Sunday in your own words? I took a deep breath. It was a typical Sunday until 2 men arrived claiming to be public health inspectors. When I realized their credentials were fake and one of them tried to grab my son, I acted instinctively to protect him. Your actions went beyond ordinary maternal instinct, Jessica commented. You have professional training, right? I worked in tactical training for special forces for nearly a decade before I became a mom. I taught immobilization and neutralization techniques for high-risk situations. I paused. But what happened that day wasn't about my skills. It was about a mother's right to protect her child. The interview continued with questions about the warning signs I noticed, how to distinguish legitimate authorities from imposters, and what ordinary families could do to protect themselves. Always check IDs for registration numbers that you can verify by phone. Never allow your child to be taken for an evaluation or inspection without you present. Create family passwords that only those close to you know, I explained, determined to turn our experience into useful information. As the interview was winding down, Jessica shifted to a more personal topic. Rachel, you've become a symbol of maternal resilience. How do you feel about that? I don't see myself as a symbol of anything, I replied honestly. I'm just a mom who was lucky enough to have the right training at the right time. The real focus should be on the criminal operation we're helping to dismantle. There are families who didn't get the outcome we did. After the interview, Detective Roberts and Agent Ramirez arrived with updates on the investigation. We sat in the kitchen while Margaret served coffee. The information we found in the SUV led us to a warehouse in Sacramento, Ramirez explained as she opened a folder with photographs. We found evidence linking the group to at least 18 different cases. We're talking about an interstate operation involving extortion and trafficking. The scheme worked in layers, Roberts continued. First, they targeted middle-class families, people with just enough resources to pay ransoms, but not enough to hire private security. Then, they studied routines for weeks, identifying the most vulnerable moments. The disguises varied, but they always involved authority figures, added Ramirez. Health inspectors, public service employees, fake law enforcement officers. They took advantage of people's natural tendency not to question uniformed officials. The thought that our quiet neighborhood had been meticulously studied by criminals chilled me. How many times had Logan played in the yard, completely exposed? The impact of your video has been priceless, Ramirez said, almost smiling. Since it aired, we've received over 50 reports of similar attempts that had not been reported before. People who thought it was strange but didn't report it. Now they're connecting the dots. We arrested another 7 suspects in the last 48 hours, Roberts added. And we have warrants for 5 more in different states. Searches of the kidnappers' cell phones revealed connections to an even larger network operating in semi-independent cells, making detection difficult. My video had exposed not only 2 criminals, but an entire modus operandi that relied on victim silence and obedience. 2 weeks later, when the media frenzy finally began to die down, we organized a community meeting in the neighborhood hall. Over 200 people attended, not just neighbors, but families from all over town. We need to create a community verification system, I proposed, standing before the anxious crowd. No one should accept uniforms and badges without question. Any unexpected official visit needs to be confirmed by phone, using official numbers that you look up yourself rather than numbers provided by the visitors. A mother raised her hand. But what if it's a real emergency? What if we really need to let them in? Tell them to wait outside while you verify, Kevin replied, helping me with the presentation. Legitimate authorities will understand and respect safety protocols. Our initiative quickly grew into a larger movement. We created a community verification app where residents could confirm scheduled official visits and alert others about suspicious individuals. Other communities began adopting the model, adapting it to their own needs. 3 months after the incident, I received an invitation to speak at a national child safety conference in Washington, D.C. I hesitated at first, but Logan convinced me to accept. You can help other kids, Mom, he argued, wise beyond his years. Just like in the movies, when the hero realizes he has to use his powers for the greater good. In a packed auditorium, I shared our experience and the lessons we learned. I talked about the importance of trusting your instincts, questioning authorities when needed, and creating community protection systems. At the end of the lecture, a woman approached me and introduced herself as the director of a national child protection organization. Ms. Lane, your case has inspired a complete overhaul of identification protocols for public officials in several states, she explained as she handed me her card. We'd like to work with you to develop a national educational program. I went home with a new mission. I was no longer just the avenging mom from a viral video. I was now part of a larger solution to a problem affecting communities across the country. Logan also found his own way to cope with the trauma. For his school science fair, he developed a project called Community Safety: Scientific Protocols for Identity Verification. His project featured a small device that scanned official badges and confirmed their authenticity via a municipal database. Where did you get that idea? I asked, amazed by his creativity and resilience. Remember when Detective Roberts showed us how fake badges had subtle errors that only specialists could notice? I thought we could create something so anyone could spot those mistakes, he explained proudly. The project not only won first place at the science fair, but also caught the attention of the city council, which considered implementing an improved version of the system. In the fall, 6 months after the incident, I received a call from Agent Ramirez. We just arrested the last known member of the network, she announced, satisfaction clear in her voice. 17 people indicted in total, operating in 5 states. We found enough evidence to charge all of them with multiple federal counts. And the children? I asked, dreading the answer. There was a pause on the other end. We recovered 9 children alive. 3 cases did not have a positive outcome. The rest are still under investigation. The news hit me hard. 9 families reunited, 3 forever devastated, and others still gripped by uncertainty. Our moment of luck, or preparation, made all the difference. That night, I watched Logan sleep peacefully. The nightmares that had tormented him in the early weeks finally stopped. His science project sat proudly on the shelf next to his bed along with a certificate of recognition from the police department. The doorbell rang, and I found Margaret at the front door holding a basket of muffins. I thought I'd drop by to see how you all are, she said as she came in and placed the basket on the kitchen table. I saw on the news about the final arrests. We're fine, Mom. Logan is stronger than ever, I replied. Margaret smiled as she looked out the window at the garden where, on weekends, Logan had gone back to working on his puzzles, now on a table closer to the house and visible from every window. You know, Rachel, I always wondered why you left your career in the tactical forces. It seemed like a waste of talent, she said, pausing reflectively. Now I understand that you never really stopped being who you were. You just found an even greater purpose for your skills. I smiled, feeling the weight and truth of her words. The incident revealed that the tactical agent and the devoted mom within me had never really been separate. They were two sides of the same coin, united by the most powerful instinct of all, protecting those we love. The next day, as I dropped Logan off at school, I noticed something different. Parents weren't just greeting each other. They were actively checking their surroundings, sharing information about visitors in the neighborhood, and confirming who was there. The community watch system we had started was working, creating invisible layers of protection around our children. "See you later, scientist," I said as I kissed the top of Logan's head. "See you later, Supermom," he replied with a smile before running off to meet his friends. I watched him walk away, confident and secure. Those men had made many mistakes that Sunday, but the biggest mistake was thinking they were dealing with just an ordinary mom in an ordinary neighborhood on an ordinary day. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like for more stories like this. They never imagined that they would try to take the wrong person from the wrong yard, and that decision would not only cost them their freedom, but also dismantle an entire criminal operation and transform communities across the country.